DocsAutomator is a powerful tool for turning your data into documents, and now it's available for Google Sheets. In this demo, I want to give you a full run through of all the features of the integration and how easy it is and how powerful it is to turn your Sheets data into professional looking documents. If you don't really have the time to go through all this, there's a 5-minute version of this, which just gives you a very, very quick run through of how this integration works. But this demo is more for going deep and going detailed into every aspect of it. Without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm here in my DocsAutomator account, and the first thing I do is I click New Automation. We of course select Google Sheets here as our data source. Let me also change the title here to Invoice 2024. And then I click Save and Continue. Now we're selecting the Google Doc template that we want to use. In our case, we're going to import an existing one, but I want to show you the other options here as well. You can start from scratch. If I do this, a Google Doc is going to be generated in my account now, which is this DocsAutomator Playground template. It just familiarizes you with the template syntax in DocsAutomator, basically three different placeholders that are used for templates: regular text placeholders, image placeholders, or line item placeholders, or line item declarations if you have lists of things that you want to print. We're going to look at that later. But that is the option that you have here in the middle. And then on the right, you have that option to choose a template from DocsAutomator's template library. So on DocsAutomator's website, you're going to find a few templates that you can pick from and that get you started in your projects. In our case, we import an existing one. I have a template called DocsAutomator Invoice Template 2024. This is actually also the same template that you're going to find in the template gallery. And if we open this, it very much looks like an invoice template. So it has all the placeholders you would expect, like client name and address data like street, city, country, then an invoice date, invoice number, and then also this line items part. So where we are printing the line items on our invoice. Below the invoice, below those line items, we have a subtotal, we have a discount field, tax rate, shipping, and then a total field. So this looks pretty good and is going to create very, very good looking invoices. So I'm going to save and continue this. I'm going to save and continue here. And we're done with our template part. Now we want to map our Sheets data. I have a Google Sheet prepared for this called Accounting 2024. You will actually, under the DocsAutomator's Docs, Knowledge Docs, you find this sheet as well, and you can copy it as a reference. If we go into this, you see how DocsAutomator expects Google Sheets to be created, to be formatted for generating documents out of them. Basically, the first row, a header row, needs to define what those columns are. So our first column here is ID, and then invoice number and document name, etc. So this basically tells DocsAutomator what we find in those columns. And as you can see then here, invoice number has a unique number for every invoice in this invoices sheet. And this goes all the way to the right here, where we also have subtotal, text, total, etc. So basically all those fields that we saw before already in our template, we also find again here, at least most of them in our Google Sheet. This is the invoices primary sheet. The primary sheet is where we're printing rows. So in DocsAutomator, we always print documents on a row basis. So we want to print document for this second row here, for this third row, etc. Whichever invoice we are trying to create. And then you have a separate sheet here, which is called line items. And in that line items sheet, we have the line items for our invoice. And these two need to relate to each other. So we need to tell DocsAutomator which line items belong to which invoice. And we do this by using a common identifier. In our case, which we'll also see in a bit when we are doing the mapping of that data, is we have our invoice number column, and the first one here is called invoice 10,001. And you see this invoice 10,001 again here in the first column, which is called invoice, basically which invoice does this line item belong to? And you see 10,001 three times here, which means these three line items belong to that invoice 10,001. It's very important to sort of understand this concept, because that's how we're adding line items to our, in this case, invoices, but it could be anything, right? It could be creating reports and you want to add a list of team members on those reports, or whatever list of things you want to add to your documents has to have this type of relationship. Gonna click Save and Continue. We've selected our sheet, and then we need to select our primary sheet. We've seen in the sheet before that our primary sheet is called Invoices. So we're printing from the Invoices sheet. That's where our invoices live, basically. And then we need to select the primary column. Primary column is how we identify those invoices. We have seen a column called invoice number, which we're also going to use here. So we are identifying our invoices that way, but they're also used, as we saw before, to identify our line items, to relate those line items to that specific invoice we're printing. Of course, you could have examples where line items don't matter at all. Line items are optional, right? We just now happen to have an example here where that feature comes handy because we want to print a list of the line items on our invoice. Then we are specifying a document name column. What's the document name column? The document name column is how, it basically defines how that created document is going to be called. And in our case, we have a document name column, which is called document name. There, basically, if we go back in here, it's this column. We basically have a unique name again for every invoice. This, of course, could also be done with a formula where you're building some sort of unique text out of a combination of other columns. In our case, it just happens to be another value that's in here and is giving these invoices a unique name. And we're going to use that then, this document name, in order to name the generated documents. The last thing here in this section is the PDF link column. Where do we want to store generated PDFs in order to open them again, in order to do something with them? We have a column for that as well, called PDF. That is sort of the initial setup phase. Now we're getting to the let's map our placeholders to our columns phase or section, called primary sheet columns. Primary sheet is, in our case, invoices, and the primary columns, basically those primary columns are basically, or placeholders are basically all the placeholders outside of line items, right? And we're going to see that separation here, or we are seeing that separation here by having the primary sheet columns here, and then a bit further down we're getting to the line item part. Let's focus on the primary sheet first. On the left side, we see all of our placeholders from our template. So we've seen that in the Google Docs template before: client name, invoice date, street, etc. And on the right side, I have this picker to basically pick a column from our Google Sheet again, just in the same way as we've seen it here before in this initial setup section above. We have a map columns with AI feature here, so I can just click on it and then AI will figure out the best matching column from the available columns in our primary sheet. And this looks pretty good. So they're not called exactly the same, but roughly the same. And that's why, with the help of AI, we can map these pretty quickly. We don't have a field for discount. I'm going to leave this blank for now. We don't have a column for shipping. I'm going to leave this blank as well. Instructions, same thing. I'm going to leave this blank by just taking this off. Otherwise, this looks pretty good. Then we get to the line items part. So now we're telling DocsAutomator where these line items live that we want to print. The line item sheet can only be one now because there's only one sheet left, but we've also seen that it's called line items. And then we need to define the primary column on that line items sheet. As we've seen before, the primary column needs to have as its values the same value as we're using in the primary column in our primary sheet. So in our case, that one's called, the column is called invoice, and we saw the example where it had invoice 10,001 three times for line items to tell DocsAutomator, these 3 line items belong to that invoice 10,001. Grouping and auto number are additional features that I encourage you to check out for formatting, how line items are printed in the end, adding an auto number column to that line items table. I'm going to leave this out for now. And then we get to the same part that we've seen before for the primary sheet. Now we also have that here on for our line items. Basically, we need to map our line item placeholders to columns in that line items sheet. I'm going to do that with AI as well. Here I have columns in that line items sheet that are almost called almost the same as our variables. And with that being done, I'm pretty happy with this. So I'm going to click Save and Continue. So this is now saving everything we've done to here in DocsAutomator, and we see that we have mapped 14 out of 17 columns or placeholders. The 3 that are empty we saw before were discount, shipping, and instructions. We don't really have fields for that right now. We just leave them empty. Can click here on cancel. And now we want to see how that looks like. We do that here on the right side by using the preview feature. We can pull, or this pulls from all the available invoices in our case, from our invoices sheet, our primary sheet. And here you can see why specifying that primary column comes really handy, because that's how we're identifying those invoices now. I'm going to take this 10,001 invoice that we also looked at before, and then I click on Create Preview. You can create as many previews as you like. You basically use this feature until you're happy with the document, until you're happy with what you're seeing. This also is handy to test some features that you want to explore, etc., etc. So I open this. As you can see, this adds watermarks to it. So the preview feature has this like DocsAutomator preview watermark in the background. But otherwise, this looks pretty good. We knew that discount and shipping will be empty. There is a feature in DocsAutomator where you can also now remove this row. It's actually a table in the Google Docs template, just with hidden borders. And you can remove these rows conditionally if discount or shipping is empty, as it is in this case. And as we can also see here, we're seeing these 3 line items that we saw in the line items sheet before, right? Product A, B, and C. So we now see these printed with all their details here in the table. This looks pretty good. So I'm happy to go ahead and now implement this in my Google Sheet in order to generate the documents without watermarks, like proper documents, basically. We have an option here at the bottom, set up document creation in Google Sheets. And in there, we are basically, we're having 2 options. We can add a webhook via a Sheets formula, or we have this app script options. Both are entirely copy paste, so you don't have to change anything about them. We're going to start with the webhook one first. I just click into this and copy it. And then I'm going to go into my sheet, open this again, selecting this, and I have a column here. I'm going to remove this called Create Doc. I'm just going to paste what I've just copied in here. And I can also grab this and basically add it to every row here. And in here, I have a link now. And if I open this link, this will now open another tab in my browser and basically send that request to DocsAutomator. We're going to see that document appear here in the tab in a minute, but we also see that the generated PDF is stored in our PDF column because we specified that before, right? Where do we want our generated PDFs to live? We have that PDF column, and now we can open it from here as well, but basically it's the same thing. And we see our generated document without watermarks in our Google Sheet. And that's how we can now do this for basically any row here in our Google Sheet. So I've done this now for row 10. Same thing in the background, it's going to generate. And in a bit, we're going to see our document being put into the PDF column here as well. We didn't really have any line items for this, so the line items part is now empty for this document, but you get the idea of how this works. Quick side note here, there is an option under 4, which is called PDF expiration. This basically says how long do you want DocsAutomator to keep those generated documents. Currently, it's on immediate expiry, which means these documents won't be available for very long. You can change this to a year. You can change this to no expiration, where DocsAutomator will keep those PDFs indefinitely. And you basically just have to specify here in your automation settings what you would like to have, what you would like to DocsAutomator to do with your PDFs. The default is always immediate expiry, which is just for data safety reasons, that PDFs are removed right away in case you are processing them further in some way. But if you want to keep them longer, then please adjust this setting. We've looked at the webhook option. Now let's look at the app script option. The kind of maybe not problem, but what's not so nice about the webhook option is that a separate browser tab opens, and it's a bit doesn't feel so native in Google Sheets. We can achieve that by adding this app script. Same thing here, just click into it. The only thing that I need to do, let me close this. The only thing that I need to do is I need to open my Google Sheet in a separate browser tab. What we're doing now, I can't do from DocsAutomator's interface here. Let me also close this again. From DocsAutomator's interface here, I have to open this in a separate, I have to open the Google Sheet in a separate tab, because then I can go under extensions, app script. And I basically get this interface here. I've already called this call DocsAutomator because I've done this before. In your case, probably this is going to be undefined. And you're probably also going to see a file here already probably called code.js. But you can call this whatever you want. Let's call it code.js. But you're going to see it exactly like this with this my function in here. Going to select all of this and you just paste what we've copied before from DocsAutomator's automation interface. And then we're just going to save this. This basically adds all the code necessary in order to, if I now reload this, in order to add this generate document button here in the menu bar. And what this does is it basically generates documents in the background if you've selected a column. So it just basically depends on your cursor, from your cursor position. I'm going to select this third one here. I'm going to open this, call DocsAutomator for selected rows. You're able to adapt this to whatever you want this to say in the app script, but that's how it is per default. And sorry about that. I need to authorize this. Should have done that before. There we go. Let's do this again. I'm going to run this script. Now it is running for row 3 in the background. And there we see we have a document for that row with 5 line items in that case. If we want to print for multiple rows, we can do that as well. We can just select all of those 4. We click generate document, and now we have sent 4 requests to DocsAutomator for 4, 5, and 6 and 7. We're going to see in a bit that that these documents are getting added here in our PDF column, one by one, basically. So they're processed one after the other. So we saw the 20,003 first, now 20,004. In a bit, we're going to see the 5 being added and then also the 6. So that's how the app script option works. I think that one is also a copy paste option, but it feels more native. It also feels, now you can see that this is finished. It just feels nicer to do it that way. So I recommend using the app script option over the webhook option. But I also understand if you might be a bit intimidated by adding that much code, etc. But it's just a copy paste option. It's going to have all of your credentials already added from your automation interface. So you can add a button like this very, very easily to your Google Sheet. That's how the two options work for generating documents from Google Sheets. And now we've sort of gone from selecting a Google Docs template to mapping our data to generating previews to then actually generating those documents from our Google Sheets. So we're pretty much done with like how generating documents from Google Sheets works using DocsAutomator, but there are a few additional options that I want to show you. And this is these additional actions after document generation section here. Three options. One is saving our Google Doc, and we're going to get this Google Doc URL column that we can specify again where we want to save a Google Doc. Basically, DocsAutomator per default doesn't save the generated Google Doc. It just generates a PDF. But if you want to keep the Google Doc because you want to continue editing the document, or you want to share it with someone, or whatever you want to do with those generated Google Docs, then you can do so by enabling this Save Google Doc toggle here. You can select a column where you then want to store that link to that Google Doc. And you can also select a folder from your drive where you want to store those generated Google Docs. So very, very handy for a variety of use cases, primarily, excuse me, primarily if you want to continue editing documents. The second option here is save a PDF in Google Drive. So the PDF per default is sort of added to or the link to the PDF is added to your Google Sheet. But if you want to save that PDF also in Google Drive, then you can do so. You can do this also in combination with immediate PDF expiration, because that PDF is going to be stored in Google Drive, and then DocsAutomator doesn't have to keep it anymore because it is in your Google Drive, and your Google Drive keeps it indefinitely, basically. So that's a very common approach of how users work with DocsAutomator, where they store the PDF somewhere else, like in Google Drive, and then DocsAutomator doesn't need to keep a copy of that PDF anymore. So you enable Save PDF in Google Drive, and then you have the Google Drive folder here, and you just specify that folder. Last option that I want to show you here is Send Email. Send email is basically what you probably assume what it is, sending an email after every document generation. You can specify the content here, and we get this editor interface where you just add content here. Please find your invoice attached. Attached, best Rupert. But we also, everywhere here, we have the option to add data conditionally. So we can say, dear client name, and this basically now takes the data we're passing to our document and adds it here in the email interface. We can do this in the subject editor just the same. So I could also, let me invoice, and then we take the invoice number, and this is our subject. And for recipients, I can add a static email that I always want to send this to, or I can also specify an email from our variables list. So if we add our client email, for instance, to our document, then I would also be able to specify this now dynamically. And this is how we're dynamically saying, please send an email to that client after every request. So a lot of options here in order to send emails, but that's not all. What you can also do here is you can specify conditions when those emails are sent. So you can say only send this if client name equals to, or let's say contains I don't know, Peter, like can't come up with better examples right now, but like you get an idea of how this can be used, right? You can basically specify conditions under which emails are sent, so that that they're not sent every time, but you can say only do this if the status of that invoice is not paid, or I don't know, something like this. You can define many conditions or any condition basically based on your columns. So powerful options here under additional actions after document generation. And with that, I want to conclude this video. You've seen like how easy it is and how powerful it is to generate documents from Google Sheets. I hope that this brings value to you, that you are able to generate the documents that you need to generate based on your Sheets data. I would love to hear from you. Please give me your feedback on this. If you're missing something, or also if you like it, I'd love to hear from you. And for now, I wish you happy automating and speak to you very, very soon.